Good evening and welcome to the City of Rockville VisionZero and Pedestrian Master Plan Virtual Public Forum. Before we begin, I wanted to go over a few logistics. First, this meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the city's website at some point in the future. Second, we have a brief slide presentation and that'll be followed by a question and answer period. Should questions come up during the presentation, we ask that you please hold those questions until the end. After the presentation, you're able to ask questions by you can jot it down in the question and answer box in WebEx, or you can use the raise hand function. Everyone is muted, and should they choose to speak or if they have a question, you'd be unmuted before doing so. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to Craig Sibino.
Thank you, Brian. I'm Craig Sibino. I'm the Director of Public Works, and our department is hosting this forum tonight. What we'd like to do first is just some introductory comments before we break into some slides that Brian's going to go to give you an update where we are. But we've been on a journey here in the city of Rockville back several years. And the first evidence of this journey was the complete street policy that the Mayor and Council adopted in July 2009. And that lasted a few years. We developed a bikeway master plan update in April 2017. And then a resolution passed by the Mayor and Council in October 2018, which was a VisionZero resolution. And that really started us on this path. And it was followed in July 2020. So now we're approaching almost 3 years with the first Rockville VisionZero action plan. And that's really significant because it's really set us on a culture change here in the city towards looking at our roadways from the perspective of not just automobiles, but from bicyclists, from pedestrians, from people who roll, every user. And now that we're 3 years in, we thought tonight would be a good time to give you an update on where we are, and most importantly, to hear from you on what's going on. Brian Barnett Woods has been selected about 2 years, just less than 2 years ago, for our new pedestrian bicyclist VisionZero coordinator. So he handles all that. He's the face of a lot of this, but there's a lot of people behind the scenes that are helping here. A lot of people in our department, and we're going to introduce them to some of them tonight. So with that, why don't we go to introductions?
Sure, thank you, Craig. I guess starting at the bottom of this list, I'm Brian Barnett Woods. I'm a principal transportation planner, but I'm also the VisionZero and the pedestrian and bicycle coordinator. Andrew?
Good evening, folks. My name is Andrew Lukemeyer. I am a principal transportation engineer with the city's Traffic and Transportation Division of Public Works.
Good evening. I'm Mike Hirschelman. I'm principal construction inspector with the Construction Management Division.
Good evening. My name is Daniel Seo, principal transportation engineer.
Yes, hi, and I am Jim Woods. I'm the Deputy Director of Public Works. I also wanted to introduce Rob DeSpirito, our City Manager, Barack Matite, our Deputy City Manager, and Councilmember Ashton, who has also joined us this evening.
Well, thanks, Mike, and thanks, Jim. So here's the agenda. We've already done introductions, so that's great. We're going to talk about the city's VisionZero program, some of the roadway improvements we're doing, as well as the pedestrian master plan. And then we'll get to the big part, which is the question and answers. So let's jump right in. Craig mentioned before that VisionZero was approved by the Mayor and Council July 2020. It's a program to eliminate all fatal and serious injury crashes. This is a program for everyone. It's people driving, walking, rolling, bicycling, using transit, scooters, whatever. It's not just a pedestrian bicycle program. VisionZero is also about addressing the causes of harm from crashes, not just kind of blaming who may be at fault. It's about using the data to identify the projects and doing what we can as a city to be the most effective for helping reduce serious injury and fatal crashes. Lastly, it's multidisciplinary. It's not just the folks here at the Department of Public Works, but we work with the Rockville City Police Department, the Public Information Office, the Recreation and Parks Department, MDOT, or the Maryland Department of Transportation, the state, and you, the community as well. If you're curious about seeing what the city has been working on in the past, In addition to what we discussed tonight, I recommend checking out the quarterly reports, which are available on the city's website. We provide a written report to the mayor and council every quarter, and a presentation we provide to them every other quarter. The VisionZero plan is organized into 4 action item areas: engineering, enforcement, education, and policy. Within that, there are 30 action items. These are the specific tasks that we try and work on. They have very smart objectives in that they're time bound, and they have metrics, and they identify responsible parties. Some of these action items have been completed, like establishing a VisionZero task force. Other action items are ongoing, such as coordinating with the state and the county. Some of the action items are longer term projects, but are still discrete. For instance, we're updating our roadway standards, and we've been working on that for a few years now, and we should be complete with that by the end of the summer. I mentioned that VisionZero is data driven. I pulled this chart from one of the crash analyses we completed. You can see here from 2017 to 2021, which is our study period, there were 61 serious injury crashes and 17 fatal crashes. We use this information not only to kind of track the number of crashes, but also where they take place. This is the high injury network. A high injury network road is defined as a segment of roadway that has had 4 or more serious injury or fatal crashes within that time period. I do want to point out that 37 of the crashes on the high injury network are on state roadways. The only road that is not a state road and isn't part of the high injury network is North Washington Street. And I bring this up because we have an ongoing construction project on North Washington Street, wherein we're going to repurpose travel lanes for on-street parking, protected bicycle lanes, dedicated left turn lanes, and we expect these improvements will make the roads safer for everyone. As a result of our analysis, we've taken on several other projects as well. The first I want to talk about is our intersection safety audit program. What we do is we've looked at a list of all the intersections in the city and which ones have had the most injury crashes, and we study those intersections. We look at the travel patterns, the volumes of traffic, pedestrian and bicycle use, the crash history, lighting, sight lines, etc., to identify challenges as well as opportunities for improvement. We've completed audits for these 5 intersections. I also want to note that while the city of Rockville is studying city intersections, we've also sent a list of intersections to the state for them to study. We expect to hear back later this year with their findings. And all of these intersections, how we've chosen them are based on the ones where we've had the most crashes in that nearby area. So based on the findings of our intersection audits, we'll complete intersection improvements this year. Here's an example of some of the improvements we're proposing based on those audits. For Lewis Avenue and Edmonston Drive, we're recommending high visibility continental style crosswalks, adding new stop bars and signage, and building a pedestrian refuge island. This will help motorists lower their speed when approaching the intersection from either side. This is really important because slower moving vehicles are more likely to yield to pedestrians in the crosswalk. It also improves the crossing for those traveling north and south on Lewis Avenue because you only need to look to traffic from one direction each time you cross. For East Goody Drive and Taft Court, for that intersection, we're planning to upgrade lighting, add new continental crosswalks, a pedestrian island, as well as redesign the signal and add actually new physical signals that'll have improved visibility for motorists approaching. We've already started this process to complete the improvements, and they're expected to be completed this year, so that's great. Additionally, we've picked out 5 new intersections that we want to study. These intersections were chosen based on crashes, and essentially it's the next intersections on that list. Similarly, we're looking at city-owned intersections. Regarding state intersections, once we receive the report from the state, we're going to provide the state with new intersections that we want them to look at and to improve. The idea behind this process is that while we're implementing improvements from the FY23 intersection audits, we'll have new intersections ready in the wings for improvements. Excuse me, essentially creating a pipeline of safety projects. We're also looking at sidewalks. There are many miles of sidewalk gap in the city, but we're at a point where there are no more drop-in, easy-to-do sidewalk projects. We really need to take a more detailed look at each sidewalk gap. These sidewalks are feasibility studies, and they're not for the entire stretch of the road, but portions and segments of the roadway. These 6 sections were chosen using our sidewalk prioritization policy and public feedback, and were scored based on criteria such as proximity to schools, transit stations, bus stops, commercial areas, etc. They're also evaluated using a prioritization with additional criteria from the Rockville Pedestrian Advocacy Committee. We've completed these feasibility studies, and our next step is to actually decide which ones we want to move forward for additional design and ultimate construction. Similar to the intersections, we want to continue to identify sidewalks for construction as soon as we're done building the FY23 feasible sidewalks. So that these will be the ones just waiting for us to go, excuse me, these will be the ones waiting for us to go forward. This is the next list for the feasibility studies, and we expect to start these studies in the fall. I also want to talk a little bit about Baltimore Road. I'm very excited about this project, and part of that's because we've completed most of it, which is great. It includes a shared use path that really helps connect people from the Carl Henn Millennium Trail all the way to the Rock Creek Trail. We've added traffic calming curb extensions on Baltimore Road. There's drainage improvements with new storm drain, culverts, and stream restoration. We're adding curb and gutter, and we've resurfaced the roadway. So we're doing a lot of great work, and I'm just happy to highlight this project for everyone here. Now I'd like to hand it over to Mike Herschelman, who's going to discuss the roadway improvement program for the city.
Thank you. Our roadway improvements are done through a combination of our capital improvement projects and through our maintenance, asphalt maintenance projects. All the city streets are included in this, and we try and run on a 12.5-year cycle average. We have an inspector that goes out, reviews the roads on a yearly basis, and they do a physical assessment of the road, and then we add it to a master list, and we go ahead and try and tackle those roads on the list. Recently completed, we've got Baltimore Road, North Washington Street, and East Middle Lane. Those have all been completed through capital improvement projects, not through our maintenance program. Like I said, it is a combination. Our concrete improvements done through our concrete maintenance program. We have basically a list of areas where the curb and gutter and sidewalks, repairs need to be done, whether it's ADA, whether it's, damage from tree roots. There's a combination of reasons why we have to, address the sidewalk, mainly for ADA. Sometimes we do the entire length of the sidewalks. Sometimes we do just portions of the sidewalk, depending on the need. Basically, if we have trip hazards, we grind them down until permanent repairs can be done if necessary. And again, the main focus is, our ADA compliance, getting our ramps and our sidewalks into compliance. Asphalt improvements, basically done through our asphalt maintenance. Like I said, there is some CIP work done through that. We have 5 projects, 5 of our areas where we're going to focus on coming up with King Farm Boulevard, Big Tree Court, Churchview Place, Cliff Hill Court, Cliff Hill Way. And basically the asphalt work is done after we come in and do, our concrete curbs and gutters and our sidewalks and our ramps. And then we follow up with, typically milling and overlaying the roads and, resurfacing them. For, anyone that's interested in putting in a request for a, condition of the road that's, is in question, you can go to the request for city roads with the link above and fill it out. There's also, an individual road repair list that you can find on the city website that gives you a list of the roads, that is planned for that upcoming year. And also, we do get a lot of calls for roadways that are basically SHA maintained, and we have no problem if you call in with those. We can get it directed to the correct person with SHA to address.
Thanks, Mike. Switching gears again, the Pedestrian Master Plan is complete and available online. I ask that you please take a moment to review the plan and let us know what you think. What works well? Where can we make improvements? Is there anything we're missing? I'm really looking forward to seeing everyone's comments so we can make the plan even better than it is. The plan's about 50 pages, so it's not the shortest, but it's also a lot shorter than a lot of city documents. So please do take time to read it. There's a lot of great stuff in there. The vision of the plan was developed with in part with the Rockville Pedestrian Advocacy Committee. It helps guide the city for how we want pedestrian transportation to be in the future. All residents and visitors to Rockville can choose to safely, comfortably, and conveniently walk or roll throughout the city because the transportation network and the built environment support pedestrian travel and anticipate the needs and abilities of everyone walking and rolling. And that's the plan's vision. In addition to the vision, there are 4 plan goals. The first one is ensure accessibility. This means not only should sidewalks be accessible to people of all abilities, but also that all destinations should be accessible by walking and rolling. The next goal is to advance equity. People who walk and roll are often the most vulnerable when traveling. So we want to make sure there's parity in outcome for all travel modes. We want to make sure that people walking and rolling can safely, directly, and conveniently get to where they're going, just like we have with other modes. Increasing walking and rolling, there are a lot of benefits to pedestrian travel. These include individual benefits, such as better personal health, but also community benefits, less noise, less congestion, less pollution. It's better support for economic activity. The more people walking and rolling, the better off we can make Rockville. And the last goal is to institutionalize walking and rolling. This is to help make sure that walking and rolling is part of the standard practice for the city. We have a lot of transportation policies and practices that sometimes impact walking and rolling, and we want to make sure that those impacts aren't inadvertently detrimental, and to make sure that we can support walking and rolling in all kind of aspects of what we do. Like the VisionZero plan, the Pedestrian Master Plan has a series of action items that are grouped together. I'm not going to go through all 35 of them now, but again, I highly recommend reading the plan and learning about these action items. Some key recommendations from the plan that I do want to share right now. There are recommendations for new shared use paths in the city, as well as confirming paths from prior plans. Excuse me. Also updating policies such as sidewalk prioritization and the complete streets policies to make sure that 1, they're up to date with the best practices, and 2, are better able to meet the needs of Rockville's pedestrians. We're also recommending a new program of identifying and carrying out priority pedestrian improvements. How can we really prioritize pedestrian travel, especially in dense areas or in areas near schools or commercial areas? What can we do to make walking a desirable mode of transportation? Lastly, state coordination. Some of the biggest pedestrian challenges in the city take place on state roadways that we can't maintain or change. It's vital that we continue to work with the state to make sure that M.SHA, or excuse me, the Maryland Department of Transportation State Highway Administration is able to raise their standard of pedestrian facilities as well to meet the needs of visitors and residents of Rockville. Lastly, for the Pedestrian Master Plan, here's a calendar of some upcoming public events. The first bullet, the square, that's this meeting here. Next week, we're presenting to the Planning Commission as well as some of the other advisory groups and commissions. And so TMC is Transportation Mobility Commission, RPAC is the Rockville Pedestrian Advocacy Committee, and RBAC is the Rockville Bicycle Advisory Committee. I also bolded 2 dates here. The public hearing for the Planning Commission on July 26th, and then the one for the Mayor and Council on September 11. For comments we receive between now and the Planning Commission hearing, our goal is to incorporate and respond to those comments in that Planning Commission draft, which will then be shared with the Mayor and Council. If comments are received after that, but prior to the September Mayor and Council public hearing, our goal is to incorporate those and respond to those for that Mayor and Council draft. So there's lots of opportunity to provide comments. Again, please visit the website and please take a moment to read the plan. I think there's a lot in there that you'll like. And with that, I think we're ready for questions.
So once again, if you have a question, you can either raise your hand, use the little function down at the bottom of the WebEx window to indicate that you have a question. We'll call on you and unmute you. If you prefer, you can also type your question into the Q&A. We will read it aloud and answer it in order. So first question we have is from Adam Van Grack.
First of all, thanks for all the work you guys are doing.
Go ahead, Adam. You're unmuted now.
Thanks. First, thanks for all the work you guys are doing. I think it's an important aspect to make sure all of this is done. The question I had is what I understand is action item 4 with the unsignaled intersections, because at least in my community, the issues that have been brought up with regard to pedestrians and even some biking are dealing with some of the areas that don't have signals. And there have been some minor accidents that probably haven't been reported. So our first question is in the comment period the best idea for us and the community to put in some of those unsignaled intersections that we'd like to see, whether a flashing beacon or something like that? And the second question is, one of the items that was brought up in a couple of, at least one of our community meetings, was aside from the flashing beacon, which I know would be an expensive endeavor, has there been thought to have those items where you could have a flags on either side of the intersection that someone crossing could use, which might be an alternative to some of the flashing beacons?
Your first question, I believe, Adam, was can you make suggestions for unsignalized crossings where improvements need to be made? Absolutely. You can do that either through the Pedestrian Master Plan, or you can just send them to us because they're not necessarily directly related to the action plan. So if you have a suggestion, just send it in to us and we will look at that intersection. If you have some information about some unsafe conditions there, especially you might have observed something, some behavior that's not going, it'd be helpful to convey that to us too. So when we go out there and look at it, we can look at it from the right angle of what you're seeing and what you're not seeing. As to your second comment, the suggestion that instead of using flashing beacons, that a series of flags could be used. We've heard that suggestion before. We have, I think, seen it in one place before, and we looked at it from a very afar and just haven't really got there yet. We believe that we should try to put the flashing beacons there if it rises to that level. And when they do rise there, we're hoping that we can get there. I guess we should leave it in our back pocket just in case we identify more intersections that need it and we run out of resources. But it's our belief that we ought to try for the flashing beacons or some other treatment that's more permanent, more technology efficient, more up to date before resorting to something like that.
Thank you. Next, we have Marissa Valeri.
Evening, everybody. I've been lucky enough, Marissa Valeri, I'm the co-founder and former chair of RPAC, the Rockville Pedestrian Advocacy Committee. And I've been lucky enough to work with so many of you on the panel tonight. So I just wanted to start there. Thank you. It's been a journey. RPAC's been around for 4 years, just about as long as we've been looking at a lot of these issues. So it's really been a labor of love, I think, for all of us. In regards to VisionZero and the way that we are looking at the implementation of VisionZero in the city, can you talk a little bit about pre and post pandemic and some of the safety trends that we're seeing? Have the roads or the paths or whatever, have they gotten safer? Are they about the same, or are we seeing a little bit of an uptick in the number of pedestrian and bicyclist collisions over the last 4 years?
I'll start off and then Brian can probably jump in on the traffic accident piece of it, but clearly the traffic volume has not returned since pre-pandemic. We get a report monthly from the State Highway Administration, and it's very clear that the traffic volume is still down and has not recovered. Not sure it ever will because of the telework feature that we've been seeing, but clearly the amount of automobile traffic is still significantly down. So that's the first one. Brian, do you want to address any trends and accidents that we've seen?
Sure. So comparing pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, a lot of places in the nation have actually seen an increase in crashes, particularly crashes where bicyclists and pedestrians or transit riders are the victims of those crashes. In the city of Rockville, that actually hasn't happened, where traffic crashes, including pedestrians, including bicyclists, and then in general, have actually been holding steady. I don't think that this is necessarily good news. Good news. We want them, of course, to be lower, but the trends that we've seen in other cities in the nation haven't actually happened in Rockville. Of course, as part of what we're trying to do with VisionZero and a lot of the work program that I'm in charge of is looking at where we do have crashes and then seeing how we can identify certain projects that would help address whatever those needs may be, whether it's at intersections or at stretches of roadway corridors, things like that.
Thanks, Brian. One other question that we wanted to raise is for some specific CIP projects, particularly the Town Center Road Diet project, when can we expect construction to be complete?
I can answer that for you, Jim. So for those of you who don't know, we've been in the midst of a construction project in Town Center that's involved a road diet on North Washington Street and Middle Lane particularly. The idea is to take back some of the vehicular lanes and repurpose them, so to speak, for wider sidewalks, bike facilities, buffers for bike facilities, dedicated turn lanes. It's a way to utilize the existing roadway area and hopefully repurpose them in a positive way. Currently, the project just recently repaved the roads. Prior to that, most of the concrete work was completed. Currently ongoing is the layout for the new roadway striping, and we expect that to happen here in the next week or two, weather permitting. And then beyond that, there's some other incidental things like parking meters that are going to be installed, signage that needs to be installed, and we anticipate that being completed by the end of the summer, early fall.
Thanks, Andrew. We have a question that was submitted online. It's also from Marissa Valeri, but I'll read it out loud. Can you talk a little bit about how the city is working with state and county agencies and some of the challenges that presents in implementing VisionZero?
Sure, I'll start, and then Craig and team, if you want to jump in. So one of the ways that we work with the state and the county, we have regular coordination meetings with them. And these are opportunities where, every quarter we essentially sit down and we go through a list of projects and we ask them. So for instance, I'd mentioned during the presentation, the intersection safety audits that we've done. We've given this list of intersections to the state, and then every time we meet, we ask them, okay, where are you now? And what projects have gone forward, or what has gone to the next level, and making sure that we're essentially staying on them to get these things done. Additionally, we look at other issues that come up when residents have issues or questions about whether there's enough lighting at certain street sections, or whether improvements could be to a given intersection. We'll relay those to the state, and we'll let them know, like, hey, we received this service request. It's asking about pedestrian safety. It's asking about left turn safety at on Rockville Pike or at Frederick Road. What can we do to look into that? And we kind of initiate that process for them to start looking at that, and then to get some results, whether they can be adding new crosswalks, which I think they recently did on Frederick Road and King Farm, or whether we can get new lighting, or whether there's different operational procedures we could have implemented. So we try and stay on them to help make that happen. Craig and team.
Thank you, Brian. In addition to that quarterly meeting with the state and county, where we're talking about specific improvements, specific intersections, I also attend the quarterly meeting with the Montgomery County Chief Administrative Officer, the Director of Montgomery County DOT, and the Director from Gaithersburg. And we talk about broad issues that affect us on the transportation side and coordinate. Some of them are policy, some of them are figuring out where we should coordinate with each other, how we should maybe approach the state on certain issues. And so both of those meetings, the state one that Brian talked about is actually started, and we initiated it here in Rockville, and it's carried forward about 2 years now, I think, so just under 2 years. And this other quarterly meeting that I attend, a second one. So since I've been here 17 and a half years, we've had more coordination happening in the last 2 years. And finally, on a case-by-case basis, project-by-project basis, we've been working with the county and the state. Most recently, we've been working on BRT and what's happening particularly on 355. And we've also talked about some of the Great Seneca lines that's coming around with the county. The 355 BRT line, we've been in, it must be 8-9 meetings with the county talking about how they're going to try to implement that and still meet our master plan and try to figure out how to meet the right balance between the businesses' needs, the BRT needs, and the sidewalk and the bikers, et cetera. We've gone through some pretty deliberate processing with them. And that one project probably, since I've been here, is the most coordination we've done with Montgomery County. So from an overall point of view, we are now conducting more communications and more coordination with our fellow transportation agencies than we ever have before.
Thank you, Craig and Brian. Our next question is from Councilmember Ashton.
Thank you, everyone. I just wanted to really thank our staff, our PAC, our BAC, the Traffic and Mobility Commission, and so many neighborhoods that have really helped. I did want to note that this session today is part of a series. We heard and listened in our budget survey that public safety was a big priority for our residents. And so the Rockville City Police Department did one, and now our Department of Public Works is doing one. I also just note that we have also been looking at equity and missing gaps, and really have been, if you see some of the lists and the work that's been done in the past, you'll see that Northern Rockville, Southern Rockville, East and West have really been taken care of. And, you know, there's still a lot more work to be done. But we met with, for example, school leaders at Wooten, and staff went out and physically walked the grounds to see what was their lived experience with people in that community, made changes. Work is being underway in Town Center based on the ULI recommendations. East Rockville, Twinbrook, we actually got creative and used some snow money in 1 year where we had less snow, and we're able to leverage some of that to do some work there. We're hopeful that we'll get a pedestrian bridge. Maybe that may be something we can mention a little bit more about. Met with King Farm and made adjustments there. I think in West End and Newmark, Maryland Avenue has had measurable results in really looking at the road diet there that reduced traffic violations and made the roadway safer for people who are walking to school and just traversing the neighborhood. And also I know that there's some work being done in Lincoln Park as well. I really appreciate that staff is looking at this not only from an engineering perspective, but also enforcement and education, and that we now have a dedicated coordinator, and that we know that we have to be creative about looking for funding for this because it's expensive, but it's so important to our safety. And the work that's been done on grants, leveraging some of the money that we were able to successfully negotiate through tax duplication to put towards transportation, and also accelerating some of our sidewalk prioritization in FY23 and FY24 budgets. There's still a lot more work to be done. I just wanted to also flag two things. One is there are 3 plans, if you will, that work together. VisionZero is a plan. The Bikeway Master Plan was done in 2017, and the Pedestrian Plan is underway. I would note that this is a collaborative process because, you know, sometimes the residents really can give us good insight beyond what we're thinking through. So there is a website called Engage Rockville that you can go on and help contribute feedback to that pedestrian plan. And I just wanted to thank everyone for sharing your concerns and feedback, because that's how we can improve and make the city better.
Thank you, Councilmember Ashton. Our next question is from Kathleen Kleinman. Kathleen, are you able to unmute now? All right, Kathleen, I think you have to actually click unmute now. We've given you permission to unmute yourself.
Okay, now you're clear.
There you go. Thank you.
But it kept saying I can't not unmute myself. I wanted to talk about vehicle sidewalk crossings. As a wheelchair user, I've observed and had personal experience with the fact that many of the sidewalk crossings with private driveways, as well as public office building driveways, are not done to ADA specifications. And some of them are outright impassable if you're using a wheelchair. I use a power chair so I can get through some of them. But I would say 70% of the vehicle sidewalk crossings, otherwise known as driveways, are poor. I would like to see them get special attention under one or the other of these plans, where there's a focus on the fact that so many of them have been done by the property owner that's adjacent to the public right-of-way. And it does not appear that there was any supervision that they be done in accordance with the ADA expectations. Furthermore, I'd like to say that the Public Access Board has proposed regulations which were supposed to be final rule last summer, but it didn't happen, on public right-of-way. I would like to see the city move ahead and adopt these rules as their own, even though they're not final rule yet, because there's a lot of really good technical information, and it would give you a point of reference in determining whether or not a private driveway / vehicle sidewalk crossing is done properly. I don't know what the approval process is or how they got built this way, but I even see fresh asphalt put down and it's across a public right of way and it's done improperly. Like I said, it's 70%. It's not the 30%, it's the 70% that's not correct. And these are city roads as well, of course, state roads. But if we can give some focus to the roads that are Rockville owned and maintained, and maybe have a plan for addressing what was done in the past with concrete and with asphalt, but done improperly, to correct that. I would also like to say I've submitted on the form at the Form Center requests for concerns and requests for issues to be looked at or remedied. And I just want to comment that the feedback that I get back has been inconsistent. I often don't hear anything about what I submit. Most often I get a response back saying it's been referred to somebody, but then it stops there. I don't get in terms of how it was evaluated, whether any action was taken. Instead I go by myself a month or so later and see whether or not something has been done. But it's very inconsistent in terms of feedback when you submit something at the Form Center.
Thank you, Kathleen. I think there's three issues there. I'll take the last one first, which is feedback. So thank you for that feedback on our feedback. And we will look into why you're not receiving, and maybe others are not receiving consistent feedback. So thank you for that. We'll look into that one. As far as the vehicle and sidewalk crossing where the driveways come, that has a name in the industry called a driveway apron. Okay, that's the state-of-the-art name for it. And in the city of Rockville and on state roads, that is actually public right of way. And so that piece of land, that piece of concrete, usually, it's usually not asphalt, especially in the city of Rockville. We use concrete for our sidewalks. That belongs in, and the city is required to maintain that because it attaches to the sidewalk network. And if it's not maintained properly, as you're currently stating, it's problematic because people who are trying to roll or walk down the sidewalk and have to cross over that driveway won't be able to do it. Some places require residents to maintain that. That is not the case here. So that is on city roads, that is our responsibility. We do that under the concrete program that Mike Herschelman was talking about. His inspectors go out there and assess them, and they should be assessing the driveway aprons, ADA accessibility, in addition to the sidewalk at the same time. Now, I will tell you that along 355, and we know, I can see your face, this is a common problem, that there is some issues, particularly along that stretch of roads. That is a state road, and we'll continue to try to get them to address it. I know you forwarded one particular one, and they finally have said they're going to do something about it. But if you, especially on city roads, if you see particular aprons that are not to standard, send them to us, and we'll send somebody out there, because that is part of our concrete program. That is what we're doing this circular work to do, to get them in conformance with the proper standard.
Thanks, Craig.
Okay, I just want to clarify something. I think they need special attention in the pedestrian plan, these aprons. But there's, I mean, it's my understanding is there's an inspection of the sidewalks that is done on a rotating basis. Would this be identified and put down as an issue to address and repaired if the city street, not the state street, the city street, had an improper apron?
Yes, the apron is inspected when the sidewalk is inspected, and they're inspected by two different crews. We inspect them with our operations and maintenance crews, and they walk the sidewalk, and they have new technology where they're using an iPad and a camera. They're taking pictures of deficiencies, and then on the cyclical, when they find problems, they'll either take care of it themselves if it's easy, or refer it over to Mike Herschelman's group in construction management, where they have the contractor, and then every 12 and a half years, Mike's crew goes out there and on a cyclical basis does it. So we're actually doing this more often than 12 and a half years. But if again, I will emphasize that these aprons need special look at to see if we're doing this. But if you see some, don't be shy, and I know you're not, to pass them on to us.
Craig, if you're seeing them and picking them up, you already have a long list. Seriously, because it's only about 30% that are right.
Yeah, I don't think our list is as long as you're saying, so we're gonna have to reconcile your comment with our list.
On top of that, as far as the pedestrian master plan, I definitely think we have there's an existing action item that talks about the concrete maintenance and improving the process. I believe we could add language that would clarify and specify sidewalks and the aprons as well.
Thank you. Our next question is a written question from Barry Jackson. Barry's thanking the panel for holding this forum, also asking if we can perhaps provide some individual attention to the King Farm community. He has a question particularly about what we propose to do on Redland Boulevard to help calm traffic or improve safety.
Sure. Thanks for that question. First, yes, if the King Farm community would like a presentation about the Pedestrian Master Plan, one of the, I guess, aspects of our public outreach and engagement that we're doing over the summer is to attend kind of the regularly scheduled community meetings. And then we can provide a presentation about the Pedestrian Master Plan as part of that and answering questions. As for Redland Boulevard, what we had discussed in the past is it was I guess, a demonstration project about how we could kind of repurpose the outer lanes on Redland Boulevard for parking lanes. However, at this point, we still really want to make sure that before we go forward, we really do have the buy-in of the community to test this out. But I'd be happy to further discuss this with you as well as the King Farm community in the future.
Thanks, Brian. You've mentioned the Pedestrian Master Plan, which is currently being reviewed and sought for public comment. Can you speak a little bit about when the Bikeway Master Plan will be updated?
Sure, thank you. So next year, we'll probably have some minor changes to it, but the Bikeway Master Plan was approved in 2017 and has a 10-year time horizon. So we probably won't get started on updating that Bikeway Master Plan for a few more years.
Thank you. We have a question from Isola Shaw.
Thank you so much for the presentation and for holding this webinar. For the Pedestrian Master Plan, can you talk about how you are specifically how you plan to advance equity, and what metrics and demographic data do you plan to capture to evaluate that work to advance equity?
Sure, great question. So when we look at equity, we're looking at a few things. The first thing is equity by mode, and this is to make sure that when we're taking into consideration the way motor vehicles travel or bicyclists travel or accommodations that are made for transit riders, we're also making sure that those accommodations and those considerations are being made for pedestrians. And this would be done through improvements that may prioritize pedestrian travel, such as a leading pedestrian interval or no right turns on reds, those kinds of improvements. Additionally, we want to think about geographic equity across the city of Rockville. There are many diverse neighborhoods in Rockville, and we want to make sure that we're not devoting or dedicating time and effort to any single neighborhood or community, but that we can make sure that we look through essentially the whole city of Rockville. As part of some of the VisionZero work, we do look at equity emphasis areas, which is from the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. They identify areas in the city that they call them equity emphasis areas, and they meet a few certain metrics for additional improvements, and we try and make sure that we add or we apply for studies and projects that would be in those areas. So for instance, we have a transportation land use connection grant that's moving forward, and we're looking specifically, and we identify projects in these equity emphasis areas, and we want to make sure that the pedestrian projects as well follow that. Additionally, we look at the Department of Transportation. They have a metric called, I hope I don't mess this up, but it's called the Underserved Community Census Tract, or Historically Disadvantaged Census Tracts. And we want to make sure that when we are looking at projects, where we're considering projects, that these kinds of areas are also taken into account. So for instance, right now, we're putting together a grant application under the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. And one of the things that we're trying to highlight is to make sure that we're looking at intersection improvements for all modes, but including pedestrians particularly, that are in these census tracts and that would help benefit communities that may have not had the type of attention that other communities have had in the past.
Thank you, Brian. We heard a little bit earlier about how a resident can request a specific improvement or an analysis of a unsignalized crossing. Can you also speak about where residents can go to request the construction of an individual sidewalk link, or where a resident can go to request a traffic calming measure? And when those requests are made, what kind of analysis does city staff perform to evaluate the feasibility of it?
Sure. Thank you for that question. The first part I'll talk about is for sidewalk gaps. So the city has, I mentioned before, a list of all the gaps, sidewalk gaps, and we use a prioritization to identify which sidewalks we want to look at next for feasibility. However, residents and their neighbors and communities, should they want a sidewalk on a specific street, perhaps their children pick up, the school bus there, and so they want to make sure there's a sidewalk. On the city's website, I'm sure if you just Google Rockville pedestrian sidewalks or sidewalk prioritization, there's a petition form, and residents can submit this petition form, and then the city will go out and we can implement essentially a feasibility study for that stretch of sidewalk. For the traffic calming, it's kind of a similar process. If communities feel that there's either too much or the traffic that does travel through their neighborhood is at too high a speed, they can request what is called a traffic control plan or a traffic diversion plan. And what happens is the residents or the community would fill out a petition, they would submit that to the city, and then we would go out and we would collect information that includes the volumes and the speeds of motor vehicles. And we compare that with our guidelines and our metrics to see whether they would justify a certain type of roadway improvement to help calm traffic. The program is called the guideline, or the guidelines are called Guidelines for Neighborhood Traffic Management. And you can see it kind of goes into detail on which roads are eligible and what the speeds need to be and the whole process of doing the plan and studying and carrying it out.
Thanks, Brian. Can you talk briefly about the status of two large initiatives that have been ongoing, the Rockville Metro Rail Station Visioning Project, and also the I-270 noise barrier that has been contemplated in several different projects?
I'll start off, Jim, with the noise barrier. This was requested by residents several years ago, and we submitted this to the state. The state verified through noise measurements that there was a problem, and they committed to an agreement with the city to install what they call a Type 2 noise barrier in this place, and the city initiated the CIP project for this. Subsequently, after this project was initiated, the I-270, I-495 managed lane study came about, and we successfully looked at noise up and down I-270 with the state highway staff and identified areas after they took sound measurements where walls were going to be needed. And the good news was more walls were going to be constructed, including this noise barrier in the West End. And so in the Woodley Gardens area of the West End mostly. And the problem now is we were successful in kind of slowing down and stopping that version of the I-270, I-495 managed lane study. And so we're now in a pause mode waiting to see what the state is going to come back with on a revised project and how this noise wall and the other noise walls that were proposed before fit into that. So for right now, we're basically waiting to see what the next incantation of that project is and how this noise wall and others might fit into it.
And then the Rockville Metro Rail Station Visioning Concept Study is an ongoing project by the Department of Community Planning and Development Services. The last meeting they had with the Mayor and Council was, I think, at the December 2022, and they had provided, or they had presented several options, and the Mayor and Council had then redirected the staff to further explore those options, get more information in detail about it. And that team is still working on that, and no updates have been made since then. But they do have a website, and as I guess they make progress, they'll put the opportunities for comment on that as well. There is expected to be another hearing and public workshops associated with that project, and I assume that will happen after that staff continues to get the information they need to explore those other options.
Thanks, Brian. How can interested residents get more involved with either pedestrian or bicycle safety advocacy groups in Rockville?
Sure. So there's a few ways. So if residents or visitors are interested in bicycling, there's a group called the Rockville Bicycle Advisory Committee. They meet monthly. They're meeting virtually, and they talk about bicycle projects in the city, opportunities to improve bike projects, and then they provide comments and guidance on all sorts of city documents, plans, budgets, things like that. Their next meeting, they meet the first Wednesday of every month. So I think their next meeting is July 5th, if I'm right. The other, if residents or visitors are interested about pedestrian issues, there's a similar group called the Pedestrian Advocacy Committee, or the Rockville Pedestrian Advocacy Committee, excuse me. They also meet monthly virtually, and they meet on the second Thursday of the month. And similar to the bike group, this group discusses pedestrian issues, talks about pedestrian safety, and opportunities for improving the pedestrian experience in Rockville. Both those groups, if you're curious about them, you can search online. You can go to the city's website to get information about joining those meetings. Additionally, there's the Transportation and Mobility Commission, which is a group that is appointed by the mayor and council, but it's open to the public, and they meet monthly as well, and they talk about transportation issues that, the full scope, so walking, bicycling, transit, driving, development activities, that sort of thing.
So thank you for the panel. This is a lot of good information and a lot of great discussion. Any of the participants have any additional questions they'd like to ask of the panel this evening? If so, please type it into the chat or raise your hand. Okay, well, I don't see any questions being asked. So panelists, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
I'd like to go back to the question that Councilmember Ashton suggested we talk about, and that's that pedestrian bridge. And I assume she's talking about the Twinbrook pedestrian bike bridge in the southern part of the city along Rockville Pike, trying to connect the Twinbrook neighborhood to the western side of the city, specifically where the Twinbrook Quarter development's going in. We have been working on that for several months now, and meeting with the community, meeting with WMATA, meeting with BF Sol. We've identified 2 areas and now a third potential area. We just met with WMATA on that third potential area, and which is closer to the station. So we are going to be looking at all 3 of these areas, and all of them have issues, price being, cost being one of the significant ones on one particular location. But we're trying to figure out which ones are feasible, which ones we can get to with grants, and it looks like our attention is kind of now being focused to this third site closer to the metro station near the tunnel. And we just went out to the Twinbrook Citizens Association last week or this week? This week.
Yeah, it was just on Tuesday.
Tuesday this week to introduce that third location. So we're still a ways away from determining which ones are the most feasible. Our current effort is to develop a feasibility level study to see which ones are feasible and which ones we can move forward. We are probably looking at submitting a grant application to the Federal Highway Administration for possibly a planning grant to help us. All of these grants require benefit cost ratios, which are very technical, very economic driven calculations, and we're going to have to get some outside consultant help. So it's our inclination to submit this fall an application for grant money to help us through that, to evaluate these 3 sites, to determine which ones would pass muster with a positive BC ratio, benefit cost ratio, to apply and to get federal funds in a grant due to the amount of money. So we're still working on it. It's challenging. It's involving a lot of coordination, but we're still at it, and we're not giving up, and we're looking at 3 sites now, not the original 2.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you to all of you for participating in this evening's forum. I'll give the floor back to Brian to close us out.
Sure. Thank you, Jim. And thank you, everyone. Thank you for the panel, and thank you, everyone at home who was able to attend. We're very happy that you're here to listen and to ask questions and to hopefully learn something about what we're trying to do for VisionZero to make Rockville a safer place to drive, walk, bike, and take the bus. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me or anyone else here. Our contact information is all on the city website. And again, please take a moment to read that Pedestrian Master Plan. Thanks again, and have a great night.